Thank you, Susanna, for that lovely and kind introduction. And welcome everyone who has joined this presentation or who might be watching a video recording. It is a great honor to be a part of this series on tech ethics that's offered by the Instituto Humanitas Unisinos. And I hope I pronounced that correctly. Um, our theme today, we are going to be speaking about the chimera of transhumanism. And if you'll give me 1 second, I'm going to share my slides. Great. I hope that everyone can see that. And you know this information. I have already been introduced. So let's go on to our presentation. Um, so our title today refers to the chimera of transhumanism. And in Greek mythology, the chimera was a monstrous fire-breathing hybrid creature, and you can see a depiction of this here on your screen. It was a lion with a goat's head on its back and a snake's head tail. And you might be thinking, what on earth does this have to do with modern technology? But for our purposes, the chimera was a hybrid creature, a combination of a lion and a goat and a snake. And when we speak about transhumanism, this movement, this philosophy, we're speaking about hybrids between human beings and technology. So when we're talking about transhumanism, we're speaking about the fusing together, if you will, of technology and certain elements and human beings. Um, Let me move on here. So, what is transhumanism? Um, Broadly understood, transhumanism is an effort that seeks to merge human beings with technology, mechanics, chemistry, artificial intelligence, in order to enhance or to quote unquote optimize them, to make human beings something more than they already are. And for some, these human tech hybrids represent a transitional stage to what is called post-humanism, the creation of beings that are post-human. You can see the definition here. The end goal of post-humanist efforts is to replace biological human beings with something better, and which possibly, according to them, can live forever. And we will speak more about that later on in this presentation. Now, transhumanism, transhumanistic thought, dreams have been a staple of popular fiction for many, many years. You'll see some representations here on the screen. To the left, you have a early picture of the Marvel character Captain America, who, if you're familiar with the story, Captain America was an ordinary Second World War American soldier, who through chemistry was transformed into a super soldier, which gave him superpowers. Um, some of you may be familiar with on the right, the British series Doctor Who. We have the Cybermen, who were human beings that are sort of against their will, connected with these technical exoskeletons, if you will. So in popular fiction, sometimes transhumanism is depicted as a good thing. Captain America is a hero. He's fighting for the side of justice, etc. Um, and sometimes transhumanistic depictions are bad. The Cybermen are enemies of Doctor Who. So in popular fiction, it's not really been understood as uniformly a good thing. The downsides of this movement have been recognized as well. Um, However, transhumanism is rapidly moving from being a subject of popular fiction, of science fiction, to becoming reality. Um, and it's happening very, very quickly. Pope Francis, in his encyclical Laudato Si, actually made up a word to describe this. And the word he coined is rapidification. And that's his way of describing the fast pace at which some of these technological innovations are developing and being introduced. And I have a quote here from an individual. He's a scientist who was invited by the Vatican 3 years ago to participate in a symposium on artificial intelligence. And you see the quote here: a future where the boundary between carbon evolved and silicon designed life becomes ever more porous is approaching at warp speed. So there's that reference to rapidification that Pope Francis speaks about. And Koch goes on to say, this will profoundly affect humanity's future, including whether we have any. And as you might imagine, this raised a few eyebrows at this symposium in Rome. But this individual is speaking about some of the aspirations of technologists to replace human beings with what they think is something better, the goal of post-humanism. And the image you can see on the screen is one that is commonly utilized by transhumanists because they say that they are advancing humanity plus. So you can see the H and the plus. So we want to move beyond what we have known as humanity and enhance them and optimize them into something they say will be better. We're moving from human beings to human beings plus, and that is a transitional stage for some of them to post-humanism, where human beings are replaced by something better, something silicon designed as opposed to carbon evolved. Um, and what we have are many leaders in technological leaders, especially, I'm afraid, in my own United States, who are advocating this. You'll see on the left here an image of Sam Altman, who is the CEO of OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT and and DALL-E, the image generating program. And Altman foresees an inevitable merge of humans and machines. He thinks that it is a foregone conclusion that we are moving in the direction of humanity plus, where we're a hybrid, a chimera of humans and machines. You can see his quote: "Our phones control us and tell us what to do when. Social media feeds determine how we feel, and search engines decide what we think," which to me is a rather dystopian image. Just as an interesting aside, the term transhumanism was introduced about 70 years ago by the English philosopher Julian Huxley. And you may be familiar with his brother, Aldous Huxley, who had a very different vision. Aldous Huxley wrote Brave New World, in which he portrays a rather bleak picture of a transhumanist future. But that's aside. You'll see also on this slide an image of Elon Musk, who I think probably needs no introduction. He is currently the world's richest man, and certainly a leader in the technology and artificial intelligence field. He has a company, Neuralink, that is seeking to create brain implants to merge human beings and machines. And in 2017, as you can see here, Elon Musk argued that for human beings to avoid becoming redundant, purposeless in the face of artificial intelligence, human beings must merge with machines in order just to survive, in order to protect our own intellect. And somewhat tellingly, and to me rather disturbingly, um, Musk's, not his youngest child, I need to correct this. It's his 12th of his 13 children. And he named that child Techno Mechanicus, which I think speaks to his image of the future of humankind. So, some other big tech features figures are transhumanist enthusiasts. On the top image, somebody you may not be familiar with. He's not really in the public eye like maybe Sam Altman or Elon Musk, but he is a highly regarded technology innovator. He has been honored by three different US presidents for some of his inventions. And since 2012, he has been Google's principal research visionary, an AI visionary, rather broad title. Kurzweil is very enthusiastic about transhumanism. He says that we are getting closer with all of these advancements to, quote, transcending our biology. You remember that quote earlier from the Vatican conference, that silicon-based life seems to be on track to replace biologically evolved life. Kurzweil claims in his latest book that recently came out that human beings will merge with artificial intelligence by 2045. Um, he has a great admirer in the person depicted below, someone that I imagine many of you are familiar with, Bill Gates, who is the co-founder and the past CEO of Microsoft. And on the back of Kurzweil's books, Gates writes, Ray Kurzweil is the best person I know at predicting the future of artificial intelligence. So He thinks that when Kurzweil says that we are getting closer to transcending our biology, that he's he's right. My point being is that in these last two slides, you've had representatives from, you know, Elon Musk, um, OpenAI, Google, and Microsoft. So these are leaders at some of the world's most powerful and largest tech companies. So transhumanism is not a enthusiasm for simply dreamers and maybe science fiction enthusiasts. It is a philosophy that is being embraced by leaders at some of the world's largest tech companies that have great power in societies around the globe, and certainly, as I think everyone will appreciate, a great deal of money. So, the United States government is also involved in transhumanistic efforts. Two U.S. government agencies in particular, DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, basically the Pentagon's research and development arm, and then a new agency created 2 years ago by President Joe Biden, the U.S. Advanced Projects Agency for Health. And researchers at DARPA, this is a quote from an article on their efforts, they wish to free the mind from the limitations of even healthy bodies and dream of creating super soldiers who, quote, control robots with their thoughts. So the US government is funding efforts to create, I hate to say it, transhumanistic super soldiers, a bit like a Captain America. Um, and then, for instance, the second department, Advanced Projects Agency for Health, they just hired a researcher who is seeking to help human beings to live indefinitely by replacing all of our body parts bit by bit. And that includes the brain, not through a brain transplant, which is really not plausible, but by slowly um, um, adding functional brain tissue replacement, kind of updating parts of the brain so that the brain can absorb the new parts to help adding bits of youthful tissue made in a lab. This sounds like science fiction. Maybe it will remain science fiction, but these are the aspirations of lead researchers at departments of the United States government. And if you think that I'm making this up, it's all out there, on the internet for you to read. Now, I have to it has to be said that many of these technological advances associated with transhumanism have great benefits for persons living with disabilities. And these are things that we can celebrate because they really are transformative of some people's lives. Excuse me. Um, Pope Francis acknowledges this in Laudato Si. He said, "It is right to rejoice in these advances, these technological innovations, and to be excited by the immense possibilities they continue to open up before us." For instance, individuals who have lost a limb, amputees, they can now control advanced prosthetic limbs with brain commands. you know, sort of wiring the brain with the prosthetics. And so people who live with paralysis, who cannot type, they now, through a process called thought dictation, can type at rates similar to how we might text on a smartphone. Um, and So through a process called deep brain stimulation, through electrodes or chips implanted in a human brain, this can help restore normal movement to individuals living with Parkinson's disease. There are other related technologies that seek to help and aid people living with mental illness. Um, Deep brain stimulation can help alleviate severe depression or other mood disorders. Um, and that Pentagon agency I referred to in the previous slide, DARPA, they're exploring the use of tiny electronics embedded in brain tissue to alter memory formation in order to counteract PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a common ailment of individuals who have endured combat, for instance. And so we have a picture here of a very well-known individual, Stephen Hawking, very famous author, a cosmologist, a physicist. Not everyone will know that he was a member for many years of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences, although himself not a Catholic or a Christian. He was part of the conversations that were facilitated by the Vatican, and he lived with ALS. Um, and I don't know how that translates to Portuguese, but he was restricted to a motorized wheelchair. He had a special breathing apparatus, and that allowed him to continue his scientific pursuits. And so some of these technological enhancements were of great benefit to him and, of course, to many others who are living with different disabilities. And so those positive developments, Pope Francis says it is right to rejoice in them, is the sort of the consistent with some of Christianity's positive assessment of technological advancements. Even beginning, at the some of the earliest stories that we encounter in Genesis. We have the creation story, Adam and Eve, and they are instructed to till and to keep the Garden of Eden. And presumably that in that story is envisioned doing it with tools. And so we have here a story of the first people living in harmony with each other and God, and that involves work using tools, which is technology. Um, the story of Noah's Ark. You have a big boat, a technological artifact, and the instructions for that were given by God. It was constructed by Noah and others. And through this technology, well, cr part of creation was saved. So does that imply a positive assessment, even a salvific assessment of technology? Um, Jesus himself, we read in the New Testament, worked traditionally, he's understood as a carpenter. The word in Greek is tekton, from which we get the word technology. Some biblical scholars say, well, he was something of a kind of a master builder for working in construction. But the point is, God incarnate, the Son of God, used tools. He engaged with technology. And that is how he provided for himself before his ministry. So another example of a of a positive assessment of tech on the part of Christian tradition. Um, and here we have some more recent developments. Uh, St. Augustine, he attributed technological progress to providence, and he speaks about this, writes about this in The City of God, chapter 24. The father of genetic science was a priest, Gregor Mendel, one of the originators of Big Bang cosmology, um, Father Georges Lemaitre, and forgive my poor French pronunciation. You see here an image of the Vatican Observatory. Now, that is the original one that is in Rome. They also have use of a much larger and more modern one um, elsewhere. But it underscores the modern church's knowledge and embrace of scientific study. And related to that, in 1936, the Vatican established the Pontifical Academy of Sciences, and we've already heard how um, Stephen Hawking was a member of that. More recently, papal teachings have addressed tech, sometimes positively, but also sometimes with the word of caution. Pope Leo XIII in Rerum Novarum, on the rights of workers. This is the first encyclical in Catholic social teaching. And he spoke about workers' rights, but this was a response to the exploitation and struggles of some workers in light of the technological disruption of the Industrial Revolution. Pope St. John the 23rd, Mother and Teacher, 1961, says that technology can promote the common good. Pope Benedict the 16th calls for the ethically responsible use of technology. And then Pope Francis has addressed the subject of technology on many occasions, very significantly in Laudato Si, on care of creation, where he warns about technological power being concentrated in a few hands. And he urges what he quotes a resistance to the technocratic paradigm, and he has spoken about artificial intelligence on multiple occasions. January 1st this year, his World Day of Peace message was about AI. He addressed the leaders of the G7 nations on AI. He has engaged in, multiple other just smaller, less prominent documents and opportunities about the challenges in particular that are presented by some of the advancements in artificial intelligence. So that's a very brief history of some of the Catholic Church's assessment of tech, sometimes positive, but sometimes negative, especially when there's a negative impact on human flourishing and the common good. So, but as we said before, some technologists want to go beyond assisting persons with disabilities, helping people who have lost an arm, or maybe like Stephen Hawking, somebody struggling with ALS. And They want to replace human beings. They want to advance toward a post-human future. And it's because of that that Francis Fukuyama of Johns Hopkins, rather well-known political scientist in the United States, wrote a book called The End of History about 20 years ago. He claims, and I agree, that transhumanism is, quote, the world's most dangerous idea. And in his social encyclical Fratelli Tutti, Pope Francis is fears that we are becoming prisoners of a virtual reality who have lost the taste and flavor of the truly real. Um, and there is in Laudato Si, Pope Francis warns against a technocracy. The power of technology companies and some of their leaders, which sees, and I quote, no special value in human beings. So replacing human beings in their mindset is an okay aspirations because human beings in and of themselves have no special value. Um, and there was a rather well-known exchange between Elon Musk and one of the co-founders of Google, Larry Ellison, and they were having a conversation, and Elon Musk did express some concern about the future of the human race in view of technological advances. And the co-founder of Google said he dismissed Elon Musk. He said, "You're a speciesist." Again, I don't know how that translates, but it was a derogatory term that we need to not care about human beings as they exist today because that's going to get in the way of this post-human future that that they want to advance towards. So we can see, some intermediary steps of transhumanism leading to post-humanism. For instance, um, the prevalence of smart glasses, where it's all of the big tech companies are seeking to develop these. People may be familiar with the Apple Vision Pro. For instance, Apple, well, I just mentioned Google, Microsoft, Meta, otherwise known as, the parent company of Facebook and WhatsApp. They're all developing smart glasses to blend the virtual world and the real world as a transitional stage to our just being much more fully invested in a kind of virtual reality. Um, we have, just as one example, the enhanced games that a major American tech figure, Peter Thiel, who is a mentor to the newly elected vice president of the United States, J.D. Vance, he has invested in an alternative Olympics, the enhanced games, where athletes can use, doping and drugs and ergonomic aids, exoskeletons, prosthetics, and so forth, to move us beyond simple human competition into really the beginnings of kind of a robotic um, competition. We have neural implants. And I mentioned Elon Musk's Neuralink can do some wonderful things with people suffering from brain injuries or who might be paralyzed. But then there is that goal that Musk has stated, Sam Altman of OpenAI has stated, and others to merge us with machines, to quote, merge us with artificial intelligence, as Ray Kurzweil said, is probably going to happen by the year 2045. And then we have the early experiments in what are called bio biohybrid robots. And I am not a technologist, but I got to refer to my notes on this one. But the premise is that scientists can one day build complex living beings from scratch, and using a combination of organic parts and mechanical parts. So recently, researchers at Harvard University made the first biohybrid animal. It's a 16 millimeter long ray, and it has a skeleton of gold, muscles made of rat cells, and it can swim through the water. It is steered and powered by light. And so biohybrid robots combine living and synthetic materials. And recently, a team made a small biohybrid robot that can walk with a human gait. Another has constructed a robotic hand that can sense, that can be moved by a brain implant. So here there are some possibly exciting advancements, but also can be utilized to promote a vision of not just enhancing human beings, but transcending them and replacing them. And this is a development that the church is understandably cautious about. And just a year ago, Pope Francis, in speaking to what's become a regular conversation of technology experts addressing ethics called the Minerva Dialogues, and Pope Francis reminded the group of the biblical story of the Tower of Babel, which has been used as a warning against the excessive pretensions of science and technology. If you remember the story, people said, hey, let's build this great structure in order up to the sky, in a sense, displacing God, so to speak. And that led to a confusion of the languages, understood maybe today in a contemporary way of we need to be cautious about the implications of some of the things that we are trying to do with technology. Um, Pope Francis in Laudato Si wonders when, and I quote, will technology be, quote, viewed as the principal key to the meaning of existence? That these advancements raise a lot of questions. You know, when do human beings simply become appendages of machines and extensions of computer systems? What does all this imply about human nature and human agency, human dignity, being created in God's image? You know, Christians profess belief in resurrection of the body, but how will we respond to our bodies progressively being replaced? Um, Historically, what were called bodily mutilations were forbidden in the Catholic tradition, except for therapeutic medical reasons, like surgery, for instance. But would voluntary bionic or mechanical implants be therapeutic or not? And so that's why Pope Francis asked, when does technology become viewed as the principal key to the meaning of existence? And so this raises a number of ethical concerns that I'm going to introduce quickly because I know that we only have a limited amount of time. I list them here. Will this exacerbate inequities within the human family, leading to divisions between the haves and the have-nots? There is a big environmental impact on the use of artificial intelligence. We'll get to that in a minute. What does this suggest about anthropology, how we understand the human being, their challenges to human rights? And then there's the question of privacy of the mind when we're starting to be connected with implants to computer systems and artificial intelligence. So here we have an image of the Marvel character Iron Man, who you may know was actually modeled kind of recently, Tony Stark, in the movies on Elon Musk, who is a billionaire um, technologist who creates all sorts of technological devices to make him into a superhero. Um, and the reason I say that is that, there is a billionaire who is able to have a lot of toys. True in fiction with Iron Man, true in reality as well. If you're familiar with Batman, he had a lot of toys that helped him to be a superhero because he was a really rich character. Point is, so Pope Francis here, Fratelli Tutti, how wonderful it would be if the growth of scientific and technological innovation could come along with more equality and social inclusions. Which, yes, but given the expense of some of these technologies, we may find ourselves into people who can benefit from them and those who can't. Um, so we see, especially in the United States, wealthy parents, who can privilege their children with lots of tutors and expensive schools and cosmetic orthodontics and, so forth. Would in the future there be human beings who can enhance themselves because they have wealth with robotic appendages, genetic enhancements, integrated artificial intelligence personal assistants that could create a real digital divide that would translate into power and employment and all sorts of inequities. Um, and will there come a time when people who don't want to participate in some of these advancements not have a choice? Um, I went to Park the other week at a meeting of the United States Bishops' Conference. It was at a hotel. And in order to park my car in a parking lot, I had no choice but to open a website with a QR code on my phone and pay through that. I couldn't pay with cash to a human being. I couldn't even pay with my credit card in a machine. I could not park my car unless I had a smartphone. And is that kind of a vision of what we're heading toward, that unless we opt into all of these technological advancements, we really can't participate in society? So there are concerns about inequities. There are concerns about human nature. Um, and we have many transhumanistic um, enthusiasts will say, well, the body is simply just a tool that carries out the brain's commands. And so, the body can be dispensed with technology that can do things better than the human body, because the body is just a tool. And then the brain, well, it's like a computer. It has inputs, it has outputs, and some of these advanced computer systems, neural networks, AI, can do it better than the existing human brain. Okay. And okay, you may say that there's a difference between human beings and like an artificial intelligence system, but really, if something looks human and it sounds human and we think it's human when we interact with it, if it can chat with us and sound like a human, is there really a difference? And many technologists will say there's not. And these are real challenges to how well, certainly those who are Catholic would understand the human being. And you'll see I have a quote here from the Catechism of the Catholic Church. The human person, created in the image of God, is body and spirit. So the body is not something to be dispensed with. It's an integral part of who we are. And we have a soul, a spirit. We're not just a computer system that looks and sounds like it might be human. Um, but you have technologists who, seek to, create something that replaces human beings and something that could live indefinitely. That raises a lot of concerns. I have an image here of Frankenstein, kind of a fictional depiction of an early effort, which didn't end very well. But I have a quote here from Pope Francis. He said, "The increased capabilities of science and technology can lead human beings to see themselves as engaged in a creative act akin to that of God. We're acting like God, producing an image and a likeness of human life, which can talk and they can move. But, can we then infuse spirit, into inanimate matter?" And he says this is an insidious temptation. Um, Now, technologists will often say that they are working to alleviate human suffering. And through some of the developments, there are some real great benefits. And certainly in the healing tradition of the Catholic Church, inspired by Jesus who healed the sick, there is something very defensible about that. But in seeking to eliminate suffering, if that's even really possible, physical suffering, um, what does that, how does that challenge our understanding of humankind and the human experience that has a value on suffering, that has an understanding of suffering that is grounded in the suffering of the Son of God for human redemption, that leads us to solidarity, with other people, compassion, empathy, human growth. We have a Pope, St. John Paul II, who wrote an apostolic letter about the nature of suffering. So some of the transhumanist um, aspirations challenge what our tradition has come to see as of a fundamental part of the human experience. And we have, of course, an image here of the crucifixion. Um, it's interesting that very recently, within the last few weeks, Pope Francis just issued a new encyclical on the Sacred Heart of Jesus. And he said, in this day and age, we've kind of thought that maybe this is a outdated symbol or devotion, but he says he's concerned about what he calls devaluing the heart, and as this in our tradition understood as the inner core of the human person, kind of where we feel, where we make decisions, not just our brain, not just our body, but kind of the spiritual core of who we are. And he is in this encyclical saying that a renewed understanding of the heart as being a part of who we are as a human person is an important corrective to some of these challenges to Christian anthropology presented by technology. Okay? A machine, an AI, it may look like it has a heart, but it does not have a heart. And I think of the resurrection story in Luke's gospel of the disciples on the road to Emmaus and the traveler who was later revealed to be Jesus walking alongside them and speaking of the scriptures. And they said to each other, "Was our heart not burning within us?" They didn't say, "Oh, he made a great deal of intellectual sense." It was, our hearts burned. And that's a reflection of how we understand the human being, um, and how we experience the world and how we relate to God. Um, Now, some of the transhumanistic aspirations also challenge how we understand human rights. I have here a picture of the United Nations Universal Declaration on Human Rights from 1948. Um, and so if human beings are to be replaced, if we have no special value, um, what then really our understanding of human rights is completely undermined. If the brain is just a computer that can be outperformed by silicon-based computers, what does that say, about the value of the human person? Some technologists like to dismiss the human brain as simply a meat computer, and the human body as a wet scape upon which can be built something better through mechanics, through technology, and so forth. What about human creativity? Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, says really human creativity is just an algorithm, and cannot computer algorithms do it better than ours? So there's a challenge to human rights. If we're going to replace human beings with something better, then that's just a function of you know evolution. We're advancing evolution, and human beings are going to end up being like the Neanderthals. Um, so now let's move on to neuroprivacy. I know we just have a few minutes left. Um, Here we have a quote from the Pontifical Academy of Life. That's a Vatican agency. They produced a Rome call for AI ethics that you can find online, and it 3 times references the UN's Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and said that technological innovation and progress must respect the privacy of users. Pope Francis himself has warned about the creation of a surveillance state. Um, and there are, technologies being, created, the neural implants. Apple is will be introducing a new version of the AirPods that can actually harvest our brain waves. I'm not making this up. Um, so there is a concern about mind reading technologies that will violate privacy and undermine human rights. Um, And that's something that Pope Francis on January 1st made a plea about. I urge the global community of nations to work together to adopt a binding international treaty that ensures the protection of fundamental human rights. And I know that many of our listeners today are Brazilian. And actually, the Brazilian government, I know, was introducing legislation, I don't know if it passed, to protect neural privacy. And so this very issue has been a matter that has been and is being considered by the government of Brazil, and perhaps some of you can speak to that afterwards. So I have the question here: what is our end? What is the end goal of the human journey? Um, and we have here a quote from the Catechism of the Catholic Church. The Son of God became a human being so that we, human beings, might become God. Um, our ultimate hope for those of in the Christian community is to be united with God, to be united with each other through the Holy Spirit, in a sense that we participate in the very life of God. The Son of God became man so that we might become God. And in the Orthodox Christian tradition, that process of grace is called divinization. We're being joined with the divine, with God. Technologists speak of optimization. We're trying to optimize human being, make us something better than we are. That is not the Christian goal in life. The Christian goal is to become united with God. So we have different aspirations here between the Christian life and the hopes of some technological leaders. Um, so in conclusion, I think what can we do? We can celebrate the benefits of technology and the advances that they bring to others, especially people living with disabilities. We can advocate, like Pope Francis says, for binding international treaties that would protect human rights in light of some of these advancements, or maybe nationally, like in Brazil, about neuroprivacy. We can educate about some of the ethical concerns related to technology. We can keep being human and keep creating as opposed to being, just sucked into technology all the time. And that is part of what Pope Francis means when he calls us in Laudato Si to resist the technocratic paradigm. Technology can be good, it can be a blessing, but there are some trends here that challenge human rights, understanding of the human person, and possibly might lead to some great inequities. So I will stop there and thank you for your attention. I know that was a lot of information, and I don't pity our translator trying to translate all that into Portuguese. And I welcome any questions. Good.
Thank you, Professor Stud. We had a very good interpretation, and that's why we have already many questions. Thank you for your contribution. I will join the. Let's start from a question by Teka Buzman. Actually, it's a comment, and she says, I'm shocked. Is it real, the American investment for the creation of beings for the war without any heart or soul?
I understand. Yes. So I am shocked as well. And I again, Pope Francis in particular has called for a ban on autonomous weapons, um, which is somewhat related to this, um, and also a dialogue. You can read this in Laudato Si. He says, as we're looking at the future of technology, it can't just be technologists making all these decisions. We need to have a broad dialogue from persons in the philosophical world, in the social sciences. We need to include people by impacted communities, and hear what their concerns are. But sometimes those conversations don't always happen. And sometimes, yes, leaders of the United States government are not always listening to those concerns as well. I agree.
Thank you. Now let's move to the next question by Judine Vanzetto. When everything is in the cloud, how to align ethics and the evangelic values to the new dynamic of paying? Will the church be able to store its information without depending on the large cloud-based companies?
It's in Laudato Si, Pope Francis says that it is increasingly difficult to opt out. He uses the word countercultural of some of the prevailing technologies. And he says that individuals need to be very careful consumers of the products we use. But it's very difficult in our modern world to not engage with some of the big technology companies, with Apple, with Google, with Microsoft, with Elon Musk's Starlink around the world. So how do we not participate in this cloud-based world? I think continuing to advocate. I think when we raise concerns about that, we cannot ignore the environmental impact. By 2026, it is estimated that the use of energy to power artificial intelligence um, uh, products will equal the energy use of Japan, and that is next year. And so, increasing use of these data centers and artificial intelligence, it requires cooling of the data centers. It requires just huge amounts of water and energy. And I think we need to keep raising that concern. Um, and I know that some technologists say this really, their vision really can't happen without the introduction of effective nuclear fusion. And there's a lot of money being invested in the United States to create nuclear fusion, but that is a technology that doesn't exist yet. So that's not a great answer to the question. Pope Francis acknowledges the difficulty. We can't really opt out, but that's why he calls for advocacy, treaties, resisting the technocratic paradigm as best we can, um, as difficult as it is.
Thank you, Professor. There is a question by J. Tiradentes who says, will the AI technology advance will not increase inequality since most people will not be able to pay to use this advance?
That is a very significant concern. Um, and right now, a lot of AI products like ChatGPT are offered for free. Um, I don't think that is going to be sustainable because they are not showing a profit. and they will need to at some point. And so, will there be a division between those who are able to pay to use some of these products and those who do not? And that was a point I tried to make in one of my slides about the potential inequities, people who can have these technological enhancements and those who can't. And what will that do to employment? What will that do to the global economy? Pope Francis acknowledges this. There are some very real concerns there.
Oh, thank you. Zelena Santos says that's very dangerous if it's used in the hands of materialistic people who once more take the road to large social inequalities. The use of technologies used to the benefits of just a few men. Life itself uh, portrays the concern of social inequalities by the Pope, right? So the life itself depicts the Pope's social inequalities concern. It's a comment.
Yes. Yeah, no, and agreed. In Laudato Si, Pope Francis said it is very dangerous for this technological power to be held in the hands of a very few, and it is just a very small number of multinational companies who are, seeking to maximize their profit. Um, Will some of these technologies become more affordable and accessible with the passage of time? Perhaps we shall see. But as the commentator said, and as Pope Francis says, we need to be very careful not to expand existing inequalities with the introduction of these technologies.
Thank you. Alcione Roberto Ruani asks, is it possible to make religion, ethics, and transhumanism compatible in the AI age?
There are a number of that is a conversation that is taking place, and I made reference to the Minerva dialogues that are hosted by the Vatican. There are several universities in the United States. I'm familiar with some of the Catholic ones that are addressing that question. And you'd be pleased to know that some of them are Jesuit. For instance, the organization I work with, that would be known as Caritas in Brazil, we have engaged with the Jesuit University to help us create policies, to help us assess some of the new technologies. And some of the some of the technological innovations are very, very good. As Pope Francis said, we can rejoice in these advances. Some of the benefits to persons with disabilities, but it's a challenge when their goal, some of them, is to replace human beings with something they say is better that can live indefinitely, which is very hard, I think, to reconcile with a Christian understanding of human life and our relation to God.
Thank you. Guilherme Tenner asked some questions. The first one is one of the points that concerns me is that transhumanism and the algorithm rational are very concentrationist. Absurd amounts of data concentrated in very few tech poles with their supercomputers. The data ownership is excessively concentrated in the hands of big techs, etc. And now the question, how do you perceive the way these technologies are built and operated, as well as their effects on the political and as well as their effects on the political and humanity knowledge dimensions?
Well, that's a goodness, a big question. We see, and my political knowledge is restricted to the United States. Um, I did make reference to some of the efforts in Brazil related to neuro privacy, mental privacy, which is far ahead of where we are in the United States. And I think you might have a model for us, but the questioner referenced, how does this impact politics? Um, in the United States, technology companies have great resources, and there are some who are opposed to restrictions and restraints on technological development. In Silicon Valley, in the United States, where a lot of technological innovation happens and companies are centered, there's a phrase, you need to move fast and break things. We don't want the government getting in a way because that will inhibit innovation. And some wealthy tech financiers have actually publicly called tech ethics as an enemy. Um, and it remains to be seen what the incoming US administration will do regarding the regulation of tech. But from what I'm seeing, the trend is going to be the non-regulation of tech. And we'll have to see how that plays out um, in terms of impact on human rights and employment. Um, so Pope Francis has consistently called for regulation, international and more local. And what I'm seeing in the United States is a trend toward the very opposite. And I will say that that concerns me.
Thank you, Professor. We have a question by Juliana Santos. Let's see if unfortunately, we'll be forced to deal with this technology. Did I, did I understand it correctly? In our concern with the environment, will it be bigger and will we lose our planet for all?
I hope that we will not lose our planet. In Susanna's kind introduction, she mentioned that I am the board chair of a group called the Catholic Climate Covenant, which seeks to promote care of creation as envisioned in Pope Francis's encyclical Laudato Si. So I have great concern about the impact of these new technologies on the environment, not just the use of power, not just the use of water that it requires, but also the technological the waste. And this is only going to increase. And I know that we just finished the COP meetings, international meetings on environmental concerns. They just concluded a few weeks ago, and it seems that these concerns are less pressing for many governments today than they may have been even in the recent past. So I I share the concern about the impact um, on the environment of these new technologies. And that's something, what can we do? We can advocate. We can work with our lawmakers to try to restrict this as best we can.
Thank you, Professor. There is another question. How do you interpret the statement in Vaharari when you said that technology technology can create an elite of an elite of superhumans and a mass of useless people? How would you interpret, right, Yuval Harari's statement when he says that technology can create an elite of superhumans and a mass of useful or useless people?
Well, of course, from the Catholic tradition, with our understanding of human dignity, there is no such thing as a useless person. Every person is created in the image of God and has inherent dignity and value. And what the questioner is saying represents one of the challenges to that, that human beings are understood in terms of utility, what they can do, how productive they might be. Um, and, related to that question, there are great concerns about how new technologies are going to affect human employment. Um, you know, so many people around the world are employed as drivers, and in a world of robot cars, taxis, and buses, what's going to happen there? There are some estimates that, you know, hundreds of millions of people could potentially be put out of work by the introduction of some of these new technologies. And will they be considered useless humans? Some may consider them useless humans if, the human value is based on utility and money. Um, and that might be an opportunity for Christians to present a different understanding of human worth. But there are some real challenges there. Many technologists in the United States have an explicit preference for what they call high IQ, high intelligence persons, and thereby devaluing others they don't think rise to their level of intelligence. It's a disturbing trend, and there are plenty of people writing about some of the eugenic colorings, if eugenics is a word that can translate, in some of the transhumanist writings and aspirations.
And the last two questions are linked together. The question is how the transhumanist movement will continue with Elon Musk in the United States government. Can we say that we reached a new level? And the other question is, how can transhumanism feed other eugenistic movements in the world? For example, how can these movements or its ideas change the strategies of contemporary wars?
Well, the first question related to Elon Musk and the United States government, we will have to see. Although it is not a secret that Elon Musk has closely associated himself with the incoming US president. And so I think it is fair to assume that he and some other technology leaders will have a great deal of influence on policy and practice, and we'll have to see how that unfolds. In terms of warfare, um, we have, U.S. government funded efforts to create, in a sense, super soldiers. You have Pope Francis warning about the creation of autonomous weapons, drones that are controlled by algorithms and not human beings, and decisions about human lives being taken without human decision making behind it. Um, you have some in the United States saying we can't regulate these new technologies because we're in a race against China. And certainly there's an economic race, but implied in that is also a race in military technology. And Pope Francis in Fratelli Tutti um, calls for new social fraternity, and I see trends that are moving in a very opposite direction in the application of these new technologies to military applications and warfare. We'll see, but I will. If you can look it up online, Pope Francis is adamantly against the introduction of autonomous weapons, and but of course they're being worked on, and so how that will play out, we'll see. But I think some of the implications are very concerning and very disturbing.
Thank you. Now we have a last question by Janice Sheila. She is asking, and what about the risks related to neuroscience? How do you see the use of technologies in relation to human mind?
Well, partly, there are some beneficial advancements. Some of the neural implants can be of great assistance to persons who are paralyzed or who are amputees. My, I think some of the concerns are connecting um, minds with computer systems. Is there an opportunity for abuse of the right to privacy? Is there a concern about possible manipulation, um, through these interfaces? And then, the question is, one question is, how is the human mind understood? Um, is it something that can be replicated by a computer? We see the creation of neural networks, interfacing computer systems that are meant to replicate the workings of the human brain. And does that imply that we can create something better than the human brain? And so there are those anthropological challenges that are being faced. And so, yes, there's some benefits, but you have a concern about privacy, you have a concern about potential manipulation. People, there was a famous case in England several years ago, and postmasters, those who run local post offices in England, there was a new computer system implemented, and people would receive checks through the post offices. And it ended up that there were all of these mistakes. And people in England claimed that the postmasters were stealing from them. And the postmaster said, no, we're not stealing at all. It's the computer system. It's the computer system. And postmasters lost their jobs. Some of them committed suicide. And it was only later that it was discovered that the computer system was wrong, that the postmasters had not been stealing from people, but the point is that many people automatically defer to a computer's assessment. Well, the computer must be right because it's a supercomputer. It's super intelligence. It has all of this data. And so there is a concern, with some of these brain implants that people who receive them will just defer human agency to a computer. And there are great opportunities for manipulation and misinformation and abuse there that we need to be guarded about and need to have regulations to prevent that from happening.